businesses. I'm Andrew Clinton from Alt Energy Incorporated. I want to thank Richard Groves for setting this all up. The point of this presentation is to provide you with enough information to be able to make an educated and informed decision about whether solar energy is right for you and right for your business. But I'll still try and keep it concise and as short as I can. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. My contact information is at the end of this business. So anyways, like I said, I work for Alt Energy Incorporated. We were founded in 2004 and since then have completed thousands of jobs across the country. So most of this information is stemming directly from our own experiences, though there are some other sources such as the National Renewable Energy Laboratory as well as the United States Department of Energy. So let's get started with the basics, just how solar energy works. So the sun shines on your panels, which creates direct current or DC energy. The DC energy then passes through an inverter, which changes it to alternating current, or AC energy, which is used to power everything in your homes from your lights to your lava lamps. Anything that you're not currently consuming at the time, any excess generation, is then pumped back to the grid where it's used to power other homes and businesses in your area. But that excess energy provides us with another important facet of solar energy, which is net metering. Now, net metering is essentially a system where they take the difference between your energy consumption and your energy production, and they'll either charge you for it or they'll rebate you for it. So let's say that your business is consuming 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy in a month, and your solar energy system is only producing 900 kilowatt hours a month. Then you would only be charged for that 100 kilowatt hours a month that your production does not meet. On the other hand, let's say you're consuming 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, but you're producing 1,100 kilowatt hours a month. That means that the energy company will buy that energy back from you, but they'll buy it back at what's known as the avoided cost of generation, or ACG rate. In Missouri, that rate is 2.6 cents per kilowatt, which is significantly lower than the 11 to 17 cents per kilowatt hour that they would charge you for consumption, which is why we don't actually want to go too far over your consumption. The fact that we don't want to produce a system that's going to offset 200% or 300% of your annual energy consumption is because of that ACG and because that excess energy production is just less valuable than the initial energy production. But of course, there are still a large number of benefits and good things that solar can do for your business, such as reduce your high energy bills, provide a safe, low-risk investment into the ownership of a commodity producing resource. It reduces your tax liability. It satisfies any investor standards with an internal rate of return. And it also increases your marketability and your community relations, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So there are some good signs that solar would integrate into your business nicely. If you have high energy consumption and operating costs due to large air-conditioned spaces or heavy machinery, if there are few or no trees that are casting shade on your building, but essentially what it boils down to is if you don't like how much you're paying for energy, solar is probably a great solution for you. But let's get down to the brass tacks of things. There are a variety of incentives that occur on a federal, state, and local level. Starting from the top, we have a 26% federal investment tax credit. So come tax season, you'll get 26% of the total system cost back. Following that, we have deduction of depreciable assets, which occurs on both a federal and a state level. Now, there's not a number associated with this because it varies greatly depending on your tax bracket and tax liability. However, it tends to range between 15 and 35% of the total cost of the system. On a local level, we have the Evergy Metro rebate of 25 cents per watt. Now, it's important to distinguish that this is only for the Evergy Metro area and not for the Evergy West area. If you're unsure of which territory you're in, you can check your energy bill or reach out, and we're happy to let you know. Finally, we have the USDA REAP grant, or the Rural Energy for America program. This grant is designed to allow those living in rural communities access to renewable energy, as well as those who work in the agricultural industry. So it is an application process, so not every business is eligible. But again, if you'd like to know if your business is eligible, then feel free to reach out, and we'd be happy to provide you with the answer. So we see that all play out here, where we have the total system cost of $174,000, which is brought down by the 26% federal tax credit, as well as the state and federal depreciable assets, which comes down to just $66,000, or roughly 1/3 of the initial cost of the system. This yields a 14% internal rate of return and hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings over the next 25 years. Of course, there are less quantifiable benefits to solar energy as well. 70% of U.S. businesses now include addressing environmental concerns in their corporate agendas. And even large companies have seen significant growth since doing that. Companies such as Unilever and Microsoft and Patagonia, just to name a few. But on a more individual level, 53% of workers say a job where they can make an impact is important to them, and 35% of workers said they would take a pay cut just to work for a company that's committed to corporate social responsibility. So all in all, these companies, they perform better, they see growths and profits, they have better trained and more well-equipped employees who are simply want to work for a company that's committed to protecting the environment. They attract more investors, and at the end of the day, doing good is good for business, and people recognize that. Of course, this begs the question of, well, when's the right time to invest in solar? And well, there's this trade-off between the lowering amount of governmental incentives to reduce the cost, as well as the lowering cost of solar per watt. So what you can see here is that in 2015, the gross cost of solar per watt was $3.69, whereas in 2020, it was just $2.91. However, it is important to note that the rate of decrease for the cost of this of solar is going down itself. So whereas between 2015 and 2016 we were seeing about a 10% drop in the price, between 2019 and 2020 it was only about a 2% drop in price. So it's important to hold that to keep that in mind when you're thinking about the right time to invest in solar. As technologies mature, the cost decreases, the rate of that starts to slow down. But we are, however, in a great and very advantageous time at the moment, as the 26% federal tax credit was initially supposed to go down to 22% this year. However, with the passing of the COVID stimulus bill, it included a provision which deferred its reduction for another 2 years. So when is the right time to invest in solar? It's never a bad time to invest in solar, though we are in a particularly great grace period for low cost as well as high incentives. So how do we get from an idea to an installation? Well, the process is fairly simple. The first step is to send in an energy bill for analysis. This will allow us to understand better your rate structure and how that's going to play into your financial projections, as well as what size of a system is right, because like I mentioned earlier, we don't want to offset too much of your energy, or we start to lose the value of the energy that we're producing. Once we've had a chance to look at your energy bill, we then move on to conduct a site visit. This will allow us to get accurate measurements of your roof, note any obstructions, as well as do shade analysis, which allows us to calculate year-round how much the surrounding vegetation and buildings will affect your production from your solar panels. Once we have all that information, we'll conglomerate it into a proposal. This concludes the design, the production estimates, the financial performance, as well as the hardware that we'll be using and the technologies that we'll be using. So it's an important piece of paperwork, and it's going to tell you everything you need to know about your system. Once you've had a look at your proposal and you decide to move forward, we'll then go into the engineering and permitting phase, where we ensure that the system is up to NEC standards. We do a full design pack, as well as getting the permits approved by the local authority having jurisdiction. So between the time when we first begin the conversation and we first take a look at your energy bill, so when we're actually putting the nuts and bolts on your roof, it takes about 4 to 8 weeks. Once we are actually getting the nuts and bolts on the roof, there's two important facets of any installation. There's the physical layout of the system and the electrical layout of the system. Now, the way that we attach these solar panels to your roofs varies greatly depending on the type of roof that you have. So for a shingled roof, we might screw directly into your rafters, whereas for a flat roof, we might use a ballasted system, which means that we have these big trays, these big metal or plastic chassis that are going to be weighted down with bricks just to hold them on place on your roof. Now, all of this is engineered to withstand winds of over 100 miles an hour and hail of up to 1 inch in diameter, so it's important to us that the structural integrity of the system maintain intact. Similarly, with the electrical layout, it's a little bit more simple. There's wires that come off of the inverters, as well as the panels, which run to the inverters, which converts it to alternating current energy, which is then mechanically connected to the electric grid. Of course, there are a number of important considerations to keep in mind when you're choosing your installer and when you're choosing the installation crew. At Alt Energy, we don't subcontract out any of the labor. We do everything from the engineering and the designing to the installation and the electrical work ourselves, because it's important to us that we maintain a high level of integrity and performance with all of our installations. Sometimes what will happen is you'll have a solar company that might have a designer and an electrician on staff so they can complete the permitting, but all of the actual labor itself is really going to be done by day laborers who may not be so focused on ensuring that the aesthetics of your system or the performance of your system is as good and as clean as it can be. Similarly, it's important to note that there are roof penetrations and that the structural integrity of your roof is very important. If your roof is more than 20 years old, then we would highly recommend that you replace your roof before considering putting solar on there. Once solar is placed on a roof that does need a replacement, it can be disassembled and reassembled, though it can be quite a time consuming and expensive process. So it's important to note that your roof is up to snuff before we start putting solar on it. So we'll take a little break here and move on to taking a look at a couple different size systems moving forward. But that's the end of the sort of general overview of the solar systems as well as the incentives available. So here we have a 25 kilowatt system. Now this is between 55 and 65 panels on this roof. Now this was done for a small business in the area, and you'll note that it's only offsetting 86% of the energy because, as we discussed, we don't want to go too far over. And in the months between May and August, where the energy production is exceeding the energy consumption, that excess energy production is not nearly as valuable as the initial energy that's produced that you're consuming. So despite only offsetting 86% of the annual consumption, it's actually the most financially viable system. And we can see that here in the cumulative cash flow, where the total system cost of $52,000 was brought down to just $20,000 after the federal and state incentives, yielding savings of about $62,000 over the next 25 years and an internal rate of return of over 11%. So now we'll take a look at a larger system. This is a 150 kilowatt system, or roughly 350 solar panels. And again, you'll see that we're exceeding their consumption between the months of March and June, so we're only offsetting 83% of their total energy. And yet again, in the cash flow, we see that the total system cost of $230,000 is brought down to just $85,000 after the incentives, with an expected savings of close to $450,000 over the next 25 years and an internal rate of return of over 16%. Finally, we'll take a look at a very large system. So this is a 267 kilowatt system, which means it's roughly 650 panels that are on top of this roof. And you'll note that it's only offsetting 20% of this energy. Size and space was actually a limiting factor in this particular case. There was just simply not enough room on the roof or on the property to continue to put solar panels down. But if we take a look at their cash flow, yet again, we're seeing a total system cost of $350,000 brought down to $130,000 after the incentives, with an expected savings of $790,000 over the next 25 years. Now, there is another important thing to note with this system, which is that they were in fact REAP eligible. They did in fact qualify for the grant. So they got another 25% off of the system, which brought the total cost down to about $80,000 and yielded an expected savings of about just under $900,000 over the next 25 years. But like I mentioned, space was a limiting factor in this particular case. We would have loved to put more solar panels on there, but there just wasn't enough roof space. So that begs the question of, are there other ways to install solar if you don't have a great roof for it? And the answer is yes. There are ground-mounted solar systems, there's solar pergolas, there's carports, and there's awnings. So we'll start with a solar pergola. These are great spaces, and we're seeing a lot more interest in these, particularly on the residential side of solar. It provides an open, shaded space, which is great to surround your pool or provide a nice space for hosting barbecues or family events or what have you. And the great thing about these is it provides the structure, but it's also going to pay for itself. Within 10 or 12 years, you can expect to see savings already on a structure that's still providing you shade. Next, we have ground-mounted solar arrays. Now, ground-mounted solar arrays are great for areas where space is not a consideration. So on the left, we can see one that was done for an assisted living facility out in Charlottesville, Virginia. And on the right, we have one that was done for a ranch out in Idaho. Now, it is important to note with these that there is a lot more hardware that goes into this. We have to build these large metal frames and put them into the ground and set them in place, which can be more expensive. So it is the price per watt is higher. However, it does allow us to orient them due south and at the proper tilt angle. So we're actually getting a higher productivity, more production per watt as well. So it's a higher price per watt, but it's also higher production per watt. So there is that trade-off there that helps to balance out the costs. Next, we have solar carports. Now, solar carports are great where unlike ground-mounted systems where space can be a limiting factor. So it's a great way to capitalize upon space that would otherwise not be used. So you can see on the left here, this one was done for Virginia Tech out in Blacksburg, Virginia, and they wanted to install a solar system, but they didn't have a great space for it, so they put one on top of an existing car garage that they had. So now, as well as supplying electricity to the surrounding buildings, it also is providing shade for those cars there. On the right, we have an awning that was done, or a carport, excuse me, that was done for a bank in Maryland. They were interested in having a drive-through teller service, and they decided to install solar upon it, which creates a very practical application for solar and businesses. Finally, we have solar awnings. Awnings are great for two reasons. There's significantly less hardware that's involved. There's significantly less nuts and bolts that we have to provide in order to set them up on a roof, particularly when compared with a ground mount. But it's also great because it goes back to that corporate social responsibility. It lets everyone who passes your business on the street know that you care and are addressing environmental concerns with your business. So now we've taken a look at a couple different size systems and a couple different alternatives. It's a good time to take a break. We're going to move on to do a little analysis on residential systems as well. So solar energy systems provide homes with the same amount of benefits that they do for businesses. They eliminate high energy bills, they're reliable, they control monthly expenses, and they provide, there are still available incentives such as the federal investment tax credit that are good through for the next 2 years. There are also a variety of financing options that are available from a power purchasing agreement or a PPA to an outright loan from a bank. So here we can take a look at the system, and again, this is only offsetting 69% of this home's usage. And you might note that in the winter months, the usage of this home actually goes up, which is because they have electric heating. So while the days are shorter and there's less sun in the winter months and their electric's going up, we had to keep in mind that we didn't want to exceed their summer consumption by too much. So there is a way in which you could potentially make this offset a higher amount, and that would be to continue to convert a lot of your energy usage into electric. So for instance, if you wanted to install electric water heaters, then you'd be able to add more solar panels to this installation and offset a higher amount. So we see the system cost here of $33,000, which is brought down to just $20,000 after the federal tax credit as well as the Evergy rebate, which yields close to a 7% return on their investment, as well as over $80,000 in savings over the next 25 years. So to summarize, solar is great. There's a lot of benefits such as reducing your tax liability and controlling your monthly expenditures to marketability and community perceptions. The most important thing to take away from this is there's never a bad time to invest in solar. There's never a bad time to get more information about it. So if you have any questions, concerns, or whatever, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to provide you with any more specific individual information that you might need for your home or business. My contact information is listed here. Thank you for coming, and hope to see you soon.